In Peru, electoral authorities have finally concluded processing 100% of the ballot cast in Sunday's presidential election, with leftist Pedro Castillo maintaining his lead over far-right candidate Keiko Fujimori. Cuban parliamentarians have rejected the latest attacks by far-right members of the European Parliament against the island after a resolution was approved condemning alleged human rights violations in Cuba. President Emmanuel Macron said France's military operations in former European colonies of the Sahel region of West Africa will come to an end, just to be replaced by a wider Western armed intervention after consultations with the United States. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. In Peru, electoral authorities have finally concluded processing 100% of the ballots cast in Sunday's presidential election, with leftist Pedro Castillo maintaining his lead over far-right candidate Keiko Fujimori. Less than a percentage point of the ballots processed remain to be counted. Castillo currently has an advantage of over 60,000 votes over Fujimori, in what has been one of the closest presidential races in the country's history. Meanwhile, Fujimori is attempting to have 200,000 votes annulled, alleging fraud with no proof whatsoever. All international observers' missions have denied any significant irregularities witnessed in the process. Pedro Castillo addressed his supporters who gather in the capital Lima regarding the electoral results that keep him leading the presidential contest.
And with that dignity, I address you today and the Peruvian people. I bring here today the firmness which you have wrought for. These people thirsty for justice has made, brothers Peruvian people, dear brothers who are outside this country, who took a border and crossed the desert to seek better opportunities, because they didn't have a homeland to shelter them, and today we have this homeland not only to recover it, but this homeland that is for all Peruvians.
Likewise, Pedro Castillo sent a greeting to the Latin American leaders and social movements who have sent their congratulations on the count that keeps him leader of the elections.
The greeting that we have received today from living organizations of other countries, from the teachers of other countries of Latin America, of the defense fronts, from the popular organizations of neighboring countries, from the President of Bolivia, a greeting for all the people of Bolivia, President Fernandez of Argentina, President of Nicaragua, a greeting with deep Latin American fervors for each and every one of you. And I would like to greet the political leaders who today have given their time to come and recognize and say how well the people have awaked.
While Peruvian presidential hopeful Keiko Fujimori is busy trying to distort the results of Sunday's elections, a prosecutor asked a court to send her back to prison for systematically violating the conditions of her parole. The prosecution is seeking a 30-year sentence against Fujimori for leading a criminal gang. Fujimori was freed on parole in May 2020 with a number of restrictions. On Thursday, prosecutor José Domingo Pérez asked an organized crime court to revoke Fujimori's parole and remand her in custody for allegedly having met with a witness in a pending corruption case against her. She has systematically failed to comply with the rule of conduct of not communicating with witnesses, the prosecutor said. The right-wing politician is accused of having taken money from the Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht to fund her previous presidential bids in 2011 and 2016. Fujimori was legally allowed to contest for this year's elections as she had not yet been convicted for any crime. Argentina's President Alberto Fernández has officially recognized Pedro Castillo as President-elect of Peru. In a tweet, he noted that he had communicated with Castillo, to whom he expressed his desire to join efforts and work in favor of Latin America, noting that Argentina and Peru are deeply twinned nations. He also congratulated the Peruvian people for the democratic exercise. On Thursday, a delegation of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights completed its official visit to Colombia, where it heard complaints of brutality, abuse, gender violence, and forced disappearances committed by security forces. During its visit, the Commission received more than 100 testimonies from victims of state-sponsored violence. After analyzing the information collected, the delegation will issue a public statement with all observations and recommendations for the country. The nationwide protest in Colombia began on April 28th in rejection of the neoliberal policies of the Iván Duque government. Widespread and violent repression by state security forces have left dozens of peaceful protesters dead and more than 2,000 injured. Another demonstrator killed and over 50 wounded is the balance of Colombia's 43rd day of national strike mobilizations. Heavy repression took place in the cities of Cali, Bogotá, and Medellín on Wednesday. One protester was reported dead in Cali in the course of a demonstration. In Medellín, the National University's Mines faculty, students, professors, and staff gathered Wednesday for a peaceful mobilization to commemorate the Day of the Fallen Student in the framework of the national strike. Later, the protesters joined other groups marching through Medellín's downtown. The mobilization was attacked by security forces with an initial toll of 23 injured, most of them due to burns, lacerations and asphyxia, according to the alternative media outlet Colombia Informa on Twitter. In Yomasa, in southern Bogotá, the security forces charged against protesters. Social movements in support of the protest denounced that the medical mission installed in the vicinity of Portal de las Américas, also in Bogotá, was attacked with gunfire on Wednesday night. Repressive acts were also staged in the capital area of Suba and in urban centers of Popayán, Pasto, Bucaramanga, among other Colombian regions. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Cuban parliamentarians have rejected the latest attacks by far-right members of the European Parliament against the island, after a resolution was approved condemning alleged human rights violations in Cuba. In a statement, the Cuban Parliamentarians' International Relations Committee responded to the move, highlighting that once again the European Parliament has played the role of hostage to a small group of far-right MEPs, obsessed with destroying the Cuban Revolution, who have a proven link to Miami-based organizations financed by the U.S. government. Lawmakers pointed out that the resolution undermines the credibility of the European Parliament and reflects its double standards. And Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez took to Twitter to condemn the resolution of the European Parliament against Cuba. He stressed that the country will continue the construction of a more equal and democratic socialist society in the face of rhetoric of representatives of the far right linked to the U.S. subversion. And Cuba announced the suspension of the acceptance of the U.S. dollars and cash in its banking institutions as of June 21st. The Director General for the United States at the Cuban Ministry of Foreign Affairs explains the reasons for the measures.
Unavoidable and indispensable measure that our banking and financial system has to take. There is no way to avoid taking it, and it is a measure that is also motivated by the United States economic blockade. Our people know, and the international community also knows, that the purpose of the blockade is to cause damage to the Cuban economy. It is to asphyxiate the Cuban economy, and to that end it seeks to sink the income of the population, to plunge the standard of living of the population, as was once written in an official State Department document, to sink income, to generate hunger, to cause misery, and to try to create a situation of instability among the Cuban population.
An extraordinary summit of the Central American Integration Movement and Spain was held in Costa Rica this Thursday, where topics such as the impact of COVID-19 and the migratory phenomenon in the region were discussed. The summit was attended by several heads of state from Central America, the Caribbean and the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez. The leaders stressed that solidarity and infrastructure are vital in order to address the crisis of forced displacement and migration throughout the region. The 21-point joint declaration stresses the value of multilateralism, regional integration and international cooperation as strategic tools. The Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez denounced this Thursday that $10 million destined to complete payments to the COVAX mechanism were blocked by the receiving bank pending an investigation, delaying the country's access to COVID-19 vaccines. According to the Vice President, the Venezuelan ambassador in Geneva, Héctor Constant Rosales, received a communication from COVAX informing him of the outstanding balance. Rodriguez pointed out that Venezuela paid the full amount as required by COVAX, but the last 4 payments amounting to more than $10 million were blocked. The Vaccine Alliance confirms that it received a notification from the UBS Bank that the payments were blocked and are under investigation in what is yet another demonstration of the inhumane United States sanctions against the country. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said on Thursday that a higher than expected number of young men have experienced heart inflammation after their second dose of COVID-19 vaccine shots from Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna. The agency said it is still assessing the risk from the condition and has not yet concluded that there was a causal relationship between the vaccines and cases of myocarditis or pericarditis. There were 283 observed cases of heart inflammation after the second vaccine dose in those aged between 16 to 24 in the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System data. On Thursday, President Joe Biden promised the United States will donate 500 million doses to help speed the pandemic's end and call on other leaders to join him in sharing coronavirus vaccines with struggling nations around the world. But that is not the whole story. Biden forgot to mention that this humanitarian gesture excludes almost 30 million Venezuelans and the citizens of other countries Washington considers to be foes and puts them under siege. Speaking in England before the summit meeting of the Group of Seven, Biden announced the U.S. commitment to vaccine sharing. The U.S. will buy and donate 500 million Pfizer doses for distribution through the Global COVAX Alliance to 92 lower-income countries and the African Union, except those under so-called sanctions. Venezuela denounced that some $10 million transferred to the COVAX system for vaccine purchases were blocked due to the U.S. restrictions. The majority of Brazil's Supreme Federal Court judges voted this Thursday in favor of holding the Copa America football tournament in the country, scheduled to begin on Sunday. This despite the ongoing serious COVID-19 epidemic. 2 lawsuits have been filed requesting the suspension of the regional sporting event due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The tournament was to be held in Colombia and Argentina, but was cancelled in the first due to the major social unrest and in the second due to the surge in COVID-19 cases. On Thursday, Argentina's lower house debates a draft bill on epidemiological controls. The pandemic law was sent to Congress by the national government and has already been approved by the Senate. The hope is that it will be approved by Friday when the current restrictions in place to address the coronavirus expire. The bill will allow regional authorities to enforce local restrictions in areas with low COVID infection and death rates. The national government will continue to establish restrictions in areas with a larger number of cases per 100,000 inhabitants. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. President Emmanuel Macron said on Thursday France's operation fighting armed groups in the Sahel region of northwest Africa will come to an end, with troops now operating as part of the broader Western countries' intervention in the former colonies. France has always been in the habit of stationing troops in its former colonies to protect its economic interests. This time, the fight is against Sahel Islamic groups linked to Al-Qaeda. Macron said some progress had been made, but the situation is extremely fragile. Paris has grown frustrated with no apparent end in sight to its operations and political turmoil, especially in Mali, where France exploits gold mines. Macron said details of the changes will be finalized by the end of June after consultations with the United States, European states involved in the region, and then 5 Sahel countries: Mali, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, and Mauritania.
We will initiate a profound transformation of our military presence in the Sahel, the modalities and timetable of which will be specified in the coming weeks, and I will do so by the end of June. But I will initiate this work in the coming days. This transformation will result in a change of model. It will involve the transformation to a new framework. That is to say, the end of Operation Barkhane as an external operation to allow for an operation of support and cooperation to the armies of the country and the region that wish to do so, and the implementation of a military operation and international alliance associating the state of the region and all our partners strictly focuses on the fight against terrorism.
Associant les États de la région et tous nos partenaires.
In the same fashion, the French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian and Ivorian Prime Minister Pedro Castillo inaugurated an international academy for combating terrorism in Jacquesville, near Abidjan. The aim of the academy is to train cadres and special forces from the continent to help in the fight against siege terrorists who are intensifying their activities in the region. After being routed in northern Mali, the rebels regrouped to spill into the center of the country and then into neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger, a statement said. The fight against terrorism is a new phase of the counterinsurgency by which Western countries and their local allies try to keep their grip on developing nations.
With the support of France, Europe, and the international community, the state of the region must intensify their military, security and judicial cooperation, acting with the same energy and the same rigor across the entire spectrum of counter-terrorism, and this is precisely the meaning and the vocation of the AELC.
This site covers 1,100 hectares with a development project of about 15 billion CFA francs. This development makes it possible to accommodate a managed facility, to provide 3 training courses for 25 trainers simultaneously, to host 25 trainers and 80, to train units in the fields of counter-terrorism in urban and rural areas, shooting and close protection.
On Thursday, people blocked streets in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, with burning tires to protest the government decision to scrap subsidies on petrol and diesel that more than doubled prices. Finance Minister Gibril Ibrahim said scrapping subsidies was part of policies aimed at serving the interests of the Sudanese people and economy. Sudan's economy has sunk further into a deep crisis since the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir in April 2019, sparking frequent demonstrations and risking social unrest in a country in a process of transition.
Has not been studied, because raising the price of a little from 128 to 290 will lead to a threefold increase for the consumers. So if a driver normally asks for 3,000, he will ask for 9,000, and thus the people will be directly affected.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.